I separated from the military twice in my 10-year career. And after all the goods and bads of those transitions, I learned that there are really only two things that you need to have squared away before you transition out of the military. My first separation was from active duty Marine Corps in 2015. My second transition was from the Air National Guard in 2021. In 2015, I left active duty feeling good. I had money in the bank to support myself, and I had a plan on how to use my military benefits for my education and pursuing my civilian career. I knew where I was going, and I felt ready for that separation. My second separation was in 2021 from the Air National Guard and was not nearly as smooth. What made this separation so much different from the first was my abrupt ending to the identity I was creating to be a military aviator. I was in the Air Guard to fly. And when that didn't happen, I left the military entirely. For 4 years, I had worked towards becoming a military pilot, convincing myself and building an identity around that future. And all of a sudden, that was no longer the future or the identity that I could work towards and identify myself with. During this second separation, I didn't know where I was going or what my next identity would be. In addition to that, on my second transition, I was not only supporting myself. This time around, I had a family that I had to support as well. After experiencing two transitions with two entirely separate scenarios, I realized that a successful transition all boils down to two things: your money and your identity. For many, our identity is often tied to what we do for a living. If you've been in the military for any amount of time, it is likely that the military has become a massive component to your identity and how you represent yourself out into the world. At the very least, you identify yourself as a Marine, a sailor, an airman, or a soldier. If you've got some specialty job or a special job culture that forces you to have a hard-on for yourself, then that identity is that much further entrenched in your being. When you leave the military, that identity is going to be taken from you. You are going to be completely removed from everything that helped you maintain that identity. And for many, the veteran identity is not going to cut it. With the veteran identity, there is no destination and there is no more effort involved. This can often make it an unworthy identity to maintain. To know what your new identity is, you need to know where you're going. Identity is where you're going, and the money is the tool that you use to get there. If you have money but lack identity, you'll constantly be searching for something to fill that void, likely leaving you depressed. If you have an identity but no money, you're going to be forced to take jobs that contradict your identity in an effort to ultimately make it to the identity that you want. And being forced to take these jobs because you need the money is likely going to leave you depressed. Both of these situations are going to put yourself in a position where you are stuck between an old identity and your ideal identity, and doubting whether or not you will ever achieve that new identity, and therefore always cling on to the old identity of you in the military when you were young and doing well and happy with who you were. And here is the key. When people ask, when should I start preparing for the transition? They've likely already missed tremendous opportunity. It doesn't just take the last 3 to 6 months of your military career to get your money and identity right. These take years. This process will require the entirety of your military contract. Fighting the urge to spend all your money and the urge to allow the military to take over every part of your being is no easy feat. This is why I stress so much that preparing for the transition is not in your last 3, 6, 9 months of your military career. A proper, successful military transition truly starts on day 1 of your contract and fighting urges and preparing yourself to return to the civilian world. Now, if it were me and I were starting all of this all over again, here are the things that I would do. In order to get my money right, I would start by reading appropriate finance books as soon as I possibly can. If you're in the military now, it's not too late. I don't care if you're in year 1 or year 3. The best time to start is now. Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey was an instrumental book when I read it as a Lance Corporal. The sooner you can read that book and implement those financial strategies and disciplines, the sooner you'll develop a strong financial foundation where you can then make future moves to improve your life and your family's life. Follow that book to a T. Set yourself up with a no crap, no excuses budget. Your goal should be to leave the military with no debt at all and as much money in savings or invested as possible. Yes, this means you will be making significant sacrifices, maybe to your weekend plans. You will no longer know the difference between a payday weekend or a non-payday weekend. Every weekend is the same because you're now disciplined and you have a goal in mind in order to prepare yourself financially for that transition. From an identity component, be careful what you consume for that time while you're in the military. If you're only listening, reading, or following military type content, you're going to further be entrenching yourself in that identity, and it's going to be that much harder to separate from. Find content, books, podcasts, whatever it may be that brings you out of that military life. You have to have a foot in the civilian world in order to be prepared for that transition. Podcasts that bring you into new industries, new ideas, new ways of thinking that are going to better prepare you for that next career you have in mind. You can learn the language of that career. You can learn the culture of that career without actually living in it day to day. And the more you fight that military culture and prevent it from becoming everything about you, the more prepared and the easier you are going to have a transition into your next industry. Most importantly, with fighting that military identity and maintaining some kind of civilian identity is getting off base. Get yourself involved in local things like churches, groups, clubs, whatever it might be. If you're interested in music or dancing or chess, find a club, find a group of people that similarly do that. Ideally, they're not part of the military, but if they are, that's okay too. You can both work on that identity together. If you can't find any of these clubs in your area, then be the one to start the club. It's really not that hard. There's so much noise about the transition, but I'm convinced that so many of the problems from transitioning are a result of not having your money squared away and really struggling with that identity shift. And so that's why after 2 transitions for me, I recognized that those were the vulnerable points in my transitions. Either I didn't have money and I had an identity, or I had money and lacked the identity for what's next. And so this is why I want you guys to focus on these 2 components of your transition, because you have complete power to successfully hone in these components, take care of your finances, and help protect your identity. If you can quiet the noise and focus on protecting your money and protecting your identity throughout the transition, all the other smaller components of the transition are going to fall into place and you'll be okay. Money and identity, protect them both at all costs, because the military culture and lifestyle is coming for them both. If you've transitioned, I would really love to know what your 2 cents are. If you have really narrowed it down to 2 topics, 2 main components of transition in order to be successful afterwards, I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments, and let's start a discussion. Hope you guys are doing well. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.